Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Jack Hagel. As President Joe Biden faces pressure to abandon his re-election campaign, a North Carolina politician is increasingly in the spotlight. Governor Roy Cooper is said to be on a short list of possible vice presidential candidates. That's if Vice President Kamala Harris ends up the Democratic presidential nominee. Political scientists point to Cooper's longtime friendship with Harris and his winning track record as a candidate in a state where Republicans have an edge. WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht joins us to tell us the other reasons why Cooper is in the mix. Paul, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I should start by telling our listeners that we're recording this episode on Friday, July 19th. And this is a developing story, so be sure to go to WRAL.com for the latest on the presidential race. Paul, a few weeks back, Governor Roy Cooper's name started just popping up in reports about the president's re-election campaign. What were they saying, and why are we starting to see this now?
Well, we're seeing it in places like the New York Times, Politico, The Hill, other very reputable media outlets. And one reason it's happening is because pressure is mounting on Biden to leave the ticket. It seems like every day a new name, a bigger name in Washington among Democrats is calling on him to leave the ticket. And so there's interest from not only people on Capitol Hill, but across the country wondering, well, what would a reformed Democratic ticket look like? And that's where Cooper comes in.
Now, Cooper doesn't seem like a flashy name. Why would he be a contender?
Well, let's imagine that Kamala Harris is the presidential nominee. She comes from California. That is a regular punching bag of conservatives, Republicans who say, oh, it's a hotbed of failed liberal policies and so on. Well, Cooper, he's from a southern state. He's from a purple state, even with a little red tint here. Republicans controlled the legislature. Not only that, he's mainly stayed out of major scandals. So he's sort of seen as a safe pick, someone from a state that Democrats hope to win someday and that they certainly have room to improve upon. Harris also knows Cooper. They go back 20 years. She mentioned this at during one of her recent visits to North Carolina. She's called him a leader, someone that even stands out amongst other attorney generals. If you'll recall, Harris was the former attorney general of California between 2011 and 2016, at the end of 2016. And Cooper was the attorney general, from 2001 to 2016 when he ran for governor. So they overlap. They know each other from national Democratic groups, national attorney generals groups.
What does Cooper have to say about all these rumors?
Now, he's trying to avoid the spotlight and the speculation like this. We've asked him about what it would look like if Harris were the nominee. Would he be interested? And he says, don't ask me that. That is speculation our party does not need right now. Currently, Biden's the anticipated nominee. Unless he decides to step down, there's not much Democrats can do about that.
Well, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear more about why Governor Roy Cooper is being considered a possible running mate for Kamala Harris if Biden drops out. Stick around. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht about the Democratic ticket in the 2024 presidential election. Paul, you spoke with a number of political scientists and strategists about the odds of Governor Cooper ending up on the presidential ticket in November. I want to go through the main reasons they gave you. The first, and you mentioned it before the break, is that he's a winner. What's his record?
Well, would you believe that Roy Cooper has been in politics? He's been an elected official since the mid-'80s, and he has not lost a race. And that sort of adds to his legendary status here in North Carolina. Of course, through the 80s and the 90s, he was a state legislator before running to be North Carolina's attorney general in the year 2000. He won 4 terms as North Carolina's attorney general in 2000, 2004, 2008, and then in 2012 before he ran for governor in 2016. And what's special about 2016? Well, Donald Trump ran for president that year, and he won North Carolina. And at the same time, Roy Cooper beat incumbent Republican Pat McCrory That stands out. Then he won re-election in 2020, another year that Donald Trump won this state. So that jumps out at people who say, this guy has, as one political strategist put it, he has some sort of special sauce here.
That a Democrat could win in a state that leans Republican.
Absolutely.
Right? How has he been able to do it?
Well, Roy Cooper was born in Nashville, North Carolina. That's out east. It's rural country. And so he's been able to appeal to those voters who over the years have become more and more conservative, at least socially. Now, across the country, rural voters we've seen them turning away from the Democratic Party over the years. Well, Cooper's been able to hang on to some of them. He can relate. He's from there. He grew up on a tobacco farm, and he sounds like it, frankly. He speaks with an accent, and he looks vaguely similar to TV star Andy Griffith. He's someone that won't scare voters in an election. And in North Carolina, they've been able to relate to him, and he's been able to relate to them.
Now, you said earlier that pundits describe him as a safe pick. They brought that up several times when you spoke with them. What do they mean by that?
Well, he's avoided personal and political scandal for the most part. Obviously, he has his critics out there, mostly Republicans, but there's nothing on his record that really stands out apart from the pandemic, where he had control of what the laws and the rules and regulations were. And that's in part because Republicans have controlled the legislature since he entered the governor's mansion. That means that they have a majority, and in some years a supermajority, in both the state house and the state senate. So what often happens is they will pass bills that are aimed at advancing the Republican agenda, and Cooper will veto them. And that's something he's, of course, gotten applause for from Democrats and more moderate voters. He's vetoed legislation that limits abortion, that loosens gun laws, and even changes state laws for parents and students and transgender students. And so, in this state, among Democrats, he's sort of seen as a firewall, someone who saved them from extreme legislation. He's also safe in that he's not particularly gaffe prone. He's a pretty buttoned up guy, and plain spoken, he's not going to go out there and embarrass you. So that's something that Harris wouldn't have to worry about if he were her running mate.
Now, for the past year, Republicans have had a supermajority in the state legislature, and that's kind of weakened Cooper's ability to veto legislation. What has he accomplished since then?
Well, one accomplishment he would take to the national stage is that North Carolina is, since he's been governor, named as the top 1 or 2 or 3 states, ranked number 1 or 2 or 3 for business in America. I mean, that's something that legislators, lawmakers in every state pay attention to. We've been named the top state for business. I think this year we were named the number 2 best state for business. And his administration plays a part in recruiting big tech companies, VinFast, an electric car company, all these other big corporations to the state. And so you could say that he knows how to speak business as a Democrat, and I think that's something that could help him as well.
Donald Trump has led Joe Biden in the polls in North Carolina for months now. By adding Cooper to the presidential ticket, would that be enough for Democrats to overtake Trump in this state?
Well, it could be. And here's why. In 2020, Trump only beat Biden in this state by about 1.4 percentage points, or 75,000 votes. We spoke to David McLennan. He's the director of the Meredith poll down here at Meredith College in Raleigh. He said that good, solid vice presidential picks can help a ticket get at least up to, 3 percentage points. So in theory, yes, adding Cooper to the ticket, at least in North Carolina, could help the party win this state, something it didn't do 4 years ago.
Does that worry Republicans?
Well, obviously the prospect of, Trump support going down is not something they'd welcome, but they do say that history shows maybe they don't need to worry so much. They point to the year 2004. People may remember John Kerry was the presidential candidate, and his running mate was John Edwards from North Carolina, a U.S. Senator from North Carolina. Well, Republicans still won handily in this state. I believe it was 11 or 12 points here. And so they say, well, what matters more is the environment. Obviously, a local candidate can help, but it's not the ultimate decider.
Now, one other reason Cooper is in the mix in this vice presidential discussion is because he's available, right?
Right. Political strategists we spoke to said, Democrats, to a degree are concerned about their presence in states across the country. Now, a number of governors have been mentioned as potential running mates for Kamala Harris if Biden drops out. That includes Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer. It includes Kentucky's Andy Beshear. It includes Pennsylvania's Josh Shapiro. But they all have years left in their terms, and they're a lot younger. And so especially in a state like Kentucky where Democrats don't have a long history of winning, having his presence there and building his profile, it's important. I'm not going to sit here and say that, it's more important than, having a strong presidential ticket, but it's something they take into consideration. Now look at Cooper. He's on his way out. His term ends at the end of the year, and there's not a second act lined up for him. The next thing he could do, at least in North Carolina, the next step up would be U.S. Senate. Tom Tillis, his term ends in 2026. We don't know if he'll run for re-election or not yet. Cooper hasn't expressed any publicly expressed interest in running for that seat. So this would sort of be it for Cooper if he decides to join a presidential ticket and run and win.
With respect to Cooper's future, is there something in particular that you're going to be watching for in the next few days?
First, I'm going to be watching to see if Biden actually drops off the ticket. Then I'm going to watch to see how many of these other potential running mates for Harris or whoever the next nominee is express interest in the opportunity. Some of them may want to run in future years. They may say, hey, Trump has a lot of momentum now. I don't want to be a part of a losing ticket and have that stain on me. Someone like Josh Shapiro, he only became governor of Pennsylvania last year or 2 years ago. And Whitmer still has another 2 years left on her term. They could wait this cycle out and run again in a few years. So the more candidates that decline to be a running mate of Harris or whoever, the more that leaves Cooper sitting pretty. And so that's what I'll be waiting to see.
Going to be a very interesting few days and weeks ahead. Paul, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's WRAL state government reporter Paul Specht. For his recent article on Governor Roy Cooper, go to the NC Capital section of WRAL.com. I'm Jack Hagel. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.